All right, so next steps. Let's get into it. This is an overview of the program. I was a part of the full-time web development immersive, and so yeah, it's um, there's 4 weeks of, and you guys will, if you guys have questions now, feel free to ask too. But there'll be some time to get into the nitty gritty when the representative from Full Stack gets here. But yeah, 4 weeks of remote, just online learning and getting really deep into JavaScript. So all the dot maps, dot filters, dot reduce, you learn all those and you just get really familiar with manipulating arrays, just iterating over arrays, creating arrays from other arrays, creating, changing, mutating data, like transforming data into different shapes that you need. And so it really just is a deep dive into the language so that when we come to the program, we can learn about how to build web applications, and we would already have the foundations and the building blocks of the language down, and so we could just focus on learning web development concepts. And so that's 13 weeks. That's the majority of the course. And as you can see in the other categories, there's also different models. The only difference between Grace Hopper and the other cohorts is that Grace Hopper is deferred tuition, so that means that you have to pay a part of your salary after you get a job to pay back Full Stack. But for the other ones, there's financial aid available, and loan options and things like that if you don't have all the money up front. But for that one, you do have to pay beforehand. So Liz asks, does Foundations cover algorithms as well as different methods? It's not so much algorithms, because algorithms is a little more important for getting that first job, and you're going to get asked certain questions. And so during the program, we have, towards the latter half of the program, every day we come in and we practice an algorithm with a partner just to get the juices flowing and get prepared for the interview. But the Foundations itself is more just working with in depth with JavaScript, kind of just doing solving mini problems and challenges, like how do we get from point A to point B, like what functions do we need to create, just so that you can really hit the ground running when you start. But it probably teaches you things that could help you to solve algorithms and create algorithms, but that's not the focus. Although you will get take another deep dive into data structures, like objects, arrays, go in depth into functions, learn about higher order functions. It'll review those things, those concepts. But it'll go even deeper, because it'll assume that you guys know what you guys know now up to this point. And so it'll just build on top of this learning that we have. Are there any questions? Feel free to ask questions right now too, but you could also ask when the fellow arrives. Okay, so basically what this academy teaches you how to do is to create web apps. And to learn how to make web apps, you need to learn all of these different concepts. So, HTML, CSS, and in JavaScript, how do they play together to give us an interactive UI on the web? We'll learn about just fundamental programming concepts too, just so that, whatever your interest is after full stack, let's say you don't want to work in the front end, you want to work in the back end, or let's say you want to work on data, you'll learn the concepts you'll learn is going to definitely be able to be applied throughout. It's just the heavy focus is on web dev. But again, it teaches you general concepts that will help learning will help make learning other languages and other and working in other stacks a lot simpler and faster. So junior phase is it's the 13 weeks is split up into two phases. So junior phase we'll learn about how to create basically an entire application from scratch. So let's say you wanted to make like a e-commerce site, you would be able to make it by the end of the junior phase, where you could handle everything from displaying the data to like storing the data, and creating new data documents to save. So creating users, handling login, handling all the little other, all the stuff that comes with creating a web application, you'd be able to do and make. And then senior phase is the second half, where we dive deeper into algorithms. We actually make an e-commerce website. We work on a personal project, and then we work as a group on a capstone where you're encouraged to build something that you want to build, be inspired from a different app and just try to recreate it, but like with a little twist or something. It's something that will give you guys stuff to talk about during the whole job search process. And so yeah, let's get into the assessment. So today is going to be a time where you guys can take the assessment. So there's two practice assessments offered to bootcamp prep. One of them will be available today, and you can just take it and nobody's going to look at it. It's just practice. It's literally just to get you familiarized and comfortable with the environment. And then afterwards, there'll be a second risk-free assessment, meaning if you don't do good, then if you just totally bomb it, then you could just take the regular assessment as if you were just a regular applicant who didn't take bootcamp prep. But if you do well on the second assessment, which will be opened right after today's class ends, and you can take it, I believe you can. I don't think there's a time limit. So if you want to take a long time, then I think it's fine. I don't believe there's a deadline where like if you don't take this risk-free assessment by this date, then it expires or something. I believe it's a lasting opportunity. And then once you do that, and if you don't do well, then you can just do the regular assessment. And how this works is after the assessment, you may or may not get a call with a fellow, and they will interview you, get to know you, and see how you approach problems, and see if you have the fundamentals down to be able to succeed in the class. And then after that, you would hear back about acceptance into the program. So yeah, we offer practice assessments because there are for these reasons. It's just to prove that you have the fundamentals down and you're willing to put in the work, and you're not just gonna just try to float by, but you're really serious about this. And so it's a good way to gauge that. And practice assessments are also somewhat common. I wouldn't say they're every job has them, but at my first job I was given a HackerRank assessment to complete before the interview even started. So they just wanted to gauge how if you could code. And so it's it's not uncommon, I would say. Nathan asks, can we only take the practice assessment once? Yeah, I believe so. I believe both of them, once you start it, you're on a time. So when the time expires, I believe you're done. And so once you start it, it's kind of like you have to finish it. But for the second practice assessment, you don't have to start it until, I don't think there's a time limit for you to start. So you can start whenever, but once you start, you should finish. yeah, it's widely used among boot camps and employers. So I'll walk us through it, but it, yeah, provides us with a tour, calls our code for us. So, some test cases, it hides your logs, which is kind of unfortunate, but I believe for the vast majority of the problems, we'll be able to debug by using logs. I don't think you can open another browser window. And yeah, if you keep switching windows, I think it flags your activity. So if you switch too much, if you switch a couple times to, look up doc or something and figure out how to use .map or dot includes or dot index of or something, then it's not a big deal. But if you keep doing it, then it makes it seem kind of suspicious. So yeah, this is the breakdown. They're generally 4 to 6 questions, and they have a 75-minute limit. So it's in your best interest to keep track of the time. And basically it goes from easy to hard. So I would start at the easy ones and pick up those quick wins before you start trying to tackle the hard ones. And if you get stuck on one problem, just skip it, because you can skip around, and just come back to it. See if maybe, your subconscious will help you out. And if it hasn't, and you come back and you realize that your time's about to run out and you don't have answered the question correctly, I would just try and clean it up as much as possible. If you're writing lots of lines, if you're writing more than 20 lines, chances are it's probably not easy to understand, and also you might be in a rabbit hole. So it might be good to just take a deep breath and write in English what you want to do. Just write it in plain English and then try again from there. Add some comments and things like that. There's no cutoff of you have to get X amount right to pass. It's more, there's definitely some leeway. So just because you didn't get one question doesn't mean you failed, as long as you at least try to show your best work. But in all honesty, the best thing is just to have all of them right, and that way the fellow doesn't have to spend that much time. He just looks at it, he's like, yeah, this person's definitely ready for an interview. So I would just say to practice as much as possible so that you don't have to deal with that uncertainty. But even if you get a few wrong, you could still get in for sure. You still might get an interview because you solved one problem really well, and the other ones were just tricky, or just you were missing some index, and so there's definitely leeway. This book is a great book for understanding some JavaScript concepts. But I would say reading about code when you're first starting out is not as effective as writing it. So, once you start getting to the level where you're trying to understand what's actually happening under the hood, and, all the little nuances of the language, then I would recommend reading. But right off the bat, I would say, just practice the problems. So if I don't remember, I guess they do have practice problems here, but yeah, I would just focus heavily more towards on just solving things and going through problems and just trying to code it out. Not even coding it out, but at least trying to frame some type of approach to solve the problem. Code Wars is also a great resource. I like to use LeetCode. It's a little more straightforward and to the point and direct. I feel like Code Wars can be a little bit roundabout in some of the problems, and there's a lot of text and just it's like a story almost. So I was a little wary of that, but yeah, for the simple problems, I think it should be fine. And yeah, you could look at how other people solved it. Some people are really fancy with their solutions, but if it's hard to understand, then it's usually not. best solution. There's also some Project Euler. I haven't checked this out personally, but being good at math is always a plus. But by no means is it necessary, because I myself am not a math person by any stretch of the imagination, but I do enjoy coding. So yeah, a great way to continue learning is to just do a personal project, because that is sort of a way where we'll see everything come together, like if you're it's fine not to do this too, but at least be solving certain problems, at least be coding in some way, right? But the cool thing about making a project is that you can see like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all come together, and how they all work in union to output this beautiful website. So you not only get to learn and practice JavaScript, but you also learn just basically how the web works. So these are also good activities to try to keep honing your craft between now and when you either get into a boot camp or your first job. So yeah, this is all of the administrative portions. We take the assessment at the end. The no risk one is assessment 2. Just to reiterate, there's 2 assessments, and the first one we'll do today. The second one will start whenever you want. You'll start whenever you want, and that'll be the one that actually can be considered if you do well on. And then step 2 is, if you fail the second one, then just take another one normally, and then you submit your application, and then there's a technical interview, and then the turnaround is pretty quick. And if you guys have any questions about dates, what are the cohort dates and stuff, I'm sure there's a lot of curiosity around that, and like deadlines of application. I would email admissions at Full Stack for clarification on those. We have a little Bob Ross image right here, and it may seem challenging when we're all on a white platform. A white background where the painting hasn't come to fruition yet, and it may seem daunting, but if you just keep at it, then eventually you'll have this beautiful painting. Just have to stick with it and roll with the punches. So yeah, that is pretty much the lecture.